OpenAI spends over $700,000 every single day just to keep ChatGPT running. That's not server costs for the entire company. That's one product. The math behind this number reveals something most users never consider. Every conversation you have costs OpenAI money. And with GPT-5 in development, these operational costs aren't dropping. They're about to explode. I spent the last 2 weeks analyzing OpenAI's infrastructure spending, compute requirements, and per-query economics to understand exactly where this money goes. Start with what happens when you type a question into ChatGPT. You hit send. 3 seconds later, you get a response. Feels instant, feels free. But on OpenAI's end, your single query just triggered a cascade of computational operations across hundreds of specialized chips that cost more per unit than a luxury car. The hardware running ChatGPT isn't your laptop. It's not even a traditional server. OpenAI operates massive clusters of NVIDIA A100 and H100 GPUs, graphics processing units originally designed for gaming and scientific research, now repurposed for artificial intelligence. Each A100 costs roughly $10,000. Each H100 costs closer to $30,000. And ChatGPT doesn't run on one. It runs on tens of thousands of them, operating simultaneously 24 hours a day. Here's where the $700,000 daily figure comes from. Analysts estimate OpenAI processes around 10 million ChatGPT queries per day. Industry experts calculate that each query costs between 3 and 4 cents in pure computational expense. That's the electricity to power the GPUs, the cooling systems to prevent them from overheating, and the memory required to hold the model's 175 billion parameters in active state. Do the math. 10 million queries at 3.5 cents each equals $350,000 per day just in inference costs, the technical term for generating responses. But inference is only half the equation. The other half is infrastructure overhead, the physical data centers, the network bandwidth to deliver responses globally, the engineering teams optimizing code to squeeze milliseconds off response times, and the backup systems ensuring ChatGPT doesn't crash when millions of users hit it simultaneously. Add it up, and you're looking at $700,000 daily. Some estimates push it higher. That's $21 million a month, over $250 million a year, to run one chatbot. Now consider what OpenAI charges for access. ChatGPT's free tier, the version most people use, generates zero revenue per user. OpenAI loses money on every single free conversation. The paid tier, ChatGPT Plus, costs $20 monthly. Sounds reasonable until you realize a heavy user, someone making 50 queries a day, consumes roughly $50 worth of compute resources each month. OpenAI is paying $30 per month to serve a customer who's paying them $20. The business model is upside down. Growth doesn't improve profitability. Growth increases losses. Every new user who discovers ChatGPT and starts asking questions adds to OpenAI's burn rate. This is the opposite of traditional software economics, where marginal costs approach zero once you've built the product. Facebook can add 1 billion users without dramatically increasing costs. ChatGPT cannot. Each new conversation requires new computation. Each new computation costs real money. The situation gets more complex when you trace the hardware dependency. OpenAI doesn't manufacture chips. They buy them from NVIDIA, which currently holds an estimated 95% market share in AI-grade chips. This gives NVIDIA extraordinary pricing power. When demand for AI chips spiked in 2023, NVIDIA's H100 GPUs, the newest, most powerful chips, became so scarce that companies paid premiums of 50% above list price just to secure supply. OpenAI is locked into this ecosystem. They can't switch to cheaper alternatives because their models are optimized for NVIDIA's architecture. Retraining ChatGPT to run efficiently on different hardware would cost tens of millions of dollars and months of engineering time. So they pay NVIDIA's prices, accept NVIDIA's delivery schedules, and absorb the costs. This dependency extends beyond hardware. The electricity consumption is staggering. A single NVIDIA H100 GPU draws 700 watts of power under full load. Multiply that by the thousands of chips OpenAI operates, factor in cooling requirements, which can double power consumption, and you're looking at electricity bills that rival small industrial facilities. Data centers housing AI infrastructure are now negotiating directly with power companies for dedicated grid access. OpenAI's response to these costs has been to raise capital aggressively. In October 2024, they closed a $6.6 billion funding round at an $80 billion valuation. That's one of the largest private funding rounds in tech history. It sounds like a massive vote of confidence, but run the numbers against their operational costs. At $700,000 daily, OpenAI burns through $255 million annually just on ChatGPT's infrastructure. That doesn't include employee salaries, research and development for new models, or the estimated $100 million it cost to train GPT-4. The $6.6 billion in fresh capital gives them runway, but it's not infinite. At their current burn rate, which multiple reports estimate exceeds $500 million annually across all operations, that funding covers roughly 13 years. That assumes costs stay flat. They won't. GPT-5 is in development. Early reports suggest it will require significantly more computational power than GPT-4, which itself was a massive leap beyond GPT-3. More power means more chips. More chips means higher costs. The pattern isn't moving towards efficiency, it's moving towards scale. The path to profitability, if one exists, runs through one of three options. Option 1, dramatically increase the user base paying $20 monthly and hope revenue growth eventually outpaces cost growth. This is challenging when the product loses money on heavy users. Option 2, raise prices. But ChatGPT Plus already costs more than Netflix, and competitors like Google's Gemini and Anthropic's Claude are aggressively pricing their own AI assistants. Option 3, reduce costs through technical optimization, better algorithms that require fewer computational resources per query. OpenAI is pursuing all three simultaneously. They've introduced usage limits on the free tier, they're experimenting with ChatGPT Team and Enterprise plans that cost significantly more than Plus, and their engineering teams are working on inference optimization techniques that could reduce per-query costs by 30% or more. But none of these solve the fundamental problem. Operating a large language model at ChatGPT's scale is expensive, prohibitively expensive for most companies. This creates an uncomfortable reality that the AI industry rarely discusses publicly. Only a handful of companies can afford to operate ChatGPT-scale models. OpenAI can do it because they have Microsoft's financial backing and access to Microsoft's Azure cloud infrastructure. Google can do it because they own their own data centers and manufacture their own AI chips through their TPU program. Meta can do it because their AI investments were subsidized by their advertising revenue, which generated $117 billion in 2023. Smaller companies and startups can't compete at this level. They either build smaller, cheaper models with worse performance, or they become customers of OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft, paying for API access to the expensive models they can't afford to build themselves. This creates concentrated power. The companies with the most capital and infrastructure control access to the most capable AI systems. The economics create a moat, but it's a strange moat. It's not built on intellectual property or network effects. It's built on who can afford to lose the most money the longest while building towards a future business model that might eventually break even. And then there's the question of what happens when GPT-5 launches. If the pattern holds, it will be more capable than GPT-4. It will also be more expensive to operate. OpenAI will face a choice: pass those costs to users through higher prices, absorb the costs and increase their burn rate, or limit access to preserve margins. Early signs suggest they're preparing for all three. Reports indicate GPT-5 will initially launch with restricted access, possibly limited to enterprise customers paying premium prices. The free tier may remain on GPT-4 or an optimized version of it. This two-tiered system, where the best models are reserved for those who can pay, mirrors how access to computational resources has always worked. The difference is that OpenAI initially positioned ChatGPT as democratizing AI access. The economics are forcing them away from that vision. So here's what the $700,000 daily cost actually represents. It's not just an operational expense, it's evidence that the current generation of AI models exists in a strange economic space where usage and revenue are disconnected, where the product is too expensive to give away, but too useful not to, where profitability is a future promise, not a present reality. OpenAI is betting they can solve this before the capital runs out. They're betting that either costs will fall dramatically through technical breakthroughs, or that the value AI provides will become so essential that customers will pay whatever it takes. The question isn't whether ChatGPT is impressive. It is. The question is whether the economics of running it can ever make sense. And right now, nobody, not even OpenAI, knows the answer.